Hello and welcome to Fork in the Road. My name is Rusty Gaylord. I am the host of this conversation, and I'm very happy to have Roy Osing with me today. Roy is the recent author of the book, Be Different or Be Dead, the audacious, unheard of ways he took a startup to $1 billion in sales. And Roy is now helping other people apply those same ideas of being different into their career so that they can be successful in a similar way. So I'm very happy to have Roy here with me. Welcome, Roy.
Thanks, Rusty. Pleased to be here.
I think this is such an interesting idea that you can take a startup to $1 billion in sales, and inspiring, really. Where did you get the idea to be different and why that was important?
Well, the Be Different thing for me has always been part of really who I am. When I started my career, I was always curious about why we did things the way we did things. I was always curious about the common approaches in the face of new challenges. I was always curious about why we were holding on to certain ways of doing things when the world was changing so fast. It was clear to me that they weren't going to work. And so for the sake of performing in a business, I was sort of led by that curiosity to explore what I would call now breakup or breakaway ways of thinking. Not what they're calling pivots these days. Pivots are rather mediocre term in my view. It doesn't express what we as businesses need to do to survive. And that's not pivoting. It's breaking away from concepts that don't work and inventing new ones. And so that was part of my DNA really, really young in my career, early, and it's stayed with me ever since. And I've been exploring it, doing it, learning from it, making mistakes from it, but just kind of like plugging along.
Interesting. Well, maybe you can give us an example of a way that you broke away.
Well, I mean, one example was particularly when I was given the opportunity to lead a new organization in the data and internet space. I concluded that the traditional way of developing business plans just simply wasn't going to work for me, because I needed to execute quickly and I needed to get performance going quickly to take advantage of the market opportunity. And instead, the pundits of strategic planning wanted me to spend 80% of my time trying to get the plan perfect. Well, the reality is perfection doesn't exist. So I was more interested in getting to execution, right? So I invented this process called my strategic game planning process, which creates a strategic plan by answering 3 questions. How big do you want to be? Statement of your growth goals over 24 months. Who do you want to serve? Where are you going to get the money? And how are you going to compete and win? And that led me to create this only statement, which we can talk about later, which is really a statement of competitive differentiation. Answering those 3 questions got a strategic plan that was just about right. So we had enough time then to spend saying, all right, what are we going to do to breathe life into this puppy, right? What are the key execution elements that we're going to do? And so that's where we drilled down. And we learned along the way whether that original plan statement was right or not. Like, you never know going in, notwithstanding the fact that the profs tell us all this stuff. It's crap, quite frankly. It's not right. You will never know whether you've been right until you look back on where you've come from. And so why do we not come up with what I call a let's head west strategy? So I had to create that. So that was one example of completely breaking away from the way people had done it. And I got to tell you, people look askance at that even today, because we can build a strategic game plan with organizations in 2 days. Count that, 48 hours. Compare that to basically how other entities work with clients to create strategies. They don't do it in 48 hours. And the whole drive from that is to make it execution focused, because that's where the results are, Rusty. They're not in the efficacy of the plan.
Yeah, it's where the results are, and it's where you learn if you have the right strategy. And I think that's such a key element here is, you can spend weeks and weeks developing a strategy, but when you go to either, if you can't execute it, or if you execute it and then you find that it's not working, either of those things mean that your strategy was wrong to begin with. So why not do it in 48 hours and get going?
And get going. That's exactly right. And that's the key thing. Planning on the run is about execute, learn, adjust, execute, learn, adjust. So you get yourself into a perennial do loop through your whole life, built around learning and adjusting. And in my experience, that's the only way to deal with chaos. That's the only way to deal with unpredictability. That's the only way to deal with uncertainty in the world, is not to try and be precise. It's to be as imperfect as you can, as fast as you can, so you can move on.
Well, and I mean, we certainly live in a world where there's unpredictability and chaos, and things are changing. It's very dynamic. Just let alone COVID, which happened in the last couple of years. Now, with the economic uncertainty in this environment that we're entering in, good leaders have to navigate those kinds of situations. And so, this idea of being different in that way and moving quickly, being imperfect but fast, is a powerful message. It's a powerful message.
Yeah, I agree with you. It seems so obvious. Then why is it that I look outside in the leadership herd, and I see the same people doing the same old things, practicing the same old things, right?
Mhm.
Following the same old prescriptions, doing it the same way as everybody else is doing it, and looking to be different. I got news for you. If you're doing it the same way as 100 other people, why do you ever think you're going to be different? All you've done is increase the herd by one, and you're the same as everybody else. And
Yeah.
so, motivating people to put down the tools of commonality, Rusty, put the tools of sameness down and pick up the be different piece, which is painful. We can talk more about that because it's a huge commitment in terms of emotional energy and passion and your life, quite frankly. But if you do, it will pay off. Why? Can I say that? Because I did it.
So tell us about what it means to pick up that idea of being different and why it's difficult.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is we need to talk about what it isn't.
Mhm.
Okay. So defining what be different is a function of what it isn't. Like there's a lot of misunderstanding. People think it's like being different is doing your own thing. Well, it's not. It's doing the right thing in a different way that satisfies and serves a purpose, right? Whether it's be solving a problem, whether it be whatever. Okay. It's not being different for the sake of being different. It's not about your DNA. It's about what you do with your DNA, the choices you make with the DNA that you've got to solve a problem, to serve a greater purpose. So that's what be different is. The context is to be different in a way that's compelling and meaningful for people, what in terms of satisfying what people care about. Okay. So you want to be relevant and compelling in the way that you satisfy what people care about. And so it has this context of a greater purpose, whether it's let's improve the performance of the organization, let's have a more successful career over the next 24 months, let's have a more balanced life, etc. Being different plays within that space. And so for me, looking at the challenge of taking advantage of the internet and data space, it was all about how can I get, a greater piece of that market? How can I grow real quickly? We had no idea whether it was going to be a billion, but what we knew is it's going to be huge if we did the right thing. Being different was part of that. It was a means to an end. And so
Yeah.
when people say to me, what is it? Well, it's not self-expression. It's not, unless the self-expression is bridled within something that people care about, serves a purpose, serves
Yeah.
a person.
Yeah, what you're saying is it's not about you. It's not about you need to be different. It's you need to take a different approach towards meeting your goals, right? It's like, but you always
Yeah.
have to keep the goal in focus.
Yeah, it's such a good statement. Like I keep reminding people this is not narcissism 101, right? Being different isn't about narcissism. It's not about you. It's about how you can behave in a different way and choose your skills in such a way that you create a different and more remarkable outcome for someone else. That's what this challenge is all about.
Yeah, and in a productive way, right? Not in a destructive way.
Well, that's the thing. If you're serving people, okay, I'm presuming that it's because we're looking to make things better and right and perform better, and that's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So all right, so let's get back to this. I mean, one of the things you said earlier, you said, well, it's challenging. It can be challenging. It takes a little personal strength to be different. And I'd love to hear you expound on that. What about it is challenging and what kind of personal strength does it take?
Yeah. So I mean, it's you got to realize that to choose the be different journey is to choose a journey that very very few people are on. Okay,
Mhm.
because the herd, the masses are basically all kind of doing the same thing. They're all following best practices. right? They're all cuddling each other and all this kind of stuff. They're all in this wonderful, warm, and comfortable herd. And to break out of that, and to actually break out with a purpose and to try and make meaningful changes is very, very difficult. And so my experience was that, and we can talk about this, I did a number of things that I didn't know at the time were going to work, but they were all based on just breaking out in chunks. Because this is not a game of silver bullets, right? There's no formula for this, by the way. And my prescription, I'm not being prescriptive. I'm going to talk about the things that work for me, and I will not be so bold to say that they will work for you. What I will say, though, is give them a try, and maybe you can morph them into something that might satisfy you and work for you. And so I found that, it was extremely painful. I'll use the word because I actually do believe pain is a strategic concept, by the way. Mm-hmm. It was exceedingly painful, so energy draining, but you had to be relentless because you can get beaten down in this very easy. You can get sucked into the vortex of commonality. You can get sucked into the vortex of bureaucracy and all those pundits out there that want you to fail because they want to propagate their own stuff. Okay, well, I wouldn't have any of that stuff. I wouldn't go there. And so I was the proverbial pain in the ass. But what I was able to do is be a pain in the ass and grow a business to $1 billion. Not a bad trade-off.
Exactly. Well, I think what you're talking about, I guess this idea of it takes strength to persist in being different because there's such a strong pull towards being safe, towards being just like everybody else, to fitting into the mold, to doing it the way everybody else is doing it. There's a very strong pull in that way. And so it does take some conviction and some energy to continue to be creative and say, how can I do this differently? Is there a better way?
Yeah, and the other thing is you have to be able to produce results and show people results, okay? Because at the end of the day, it can't be just a philosophical chat about being different, right? Like my whole context for being different was about execute, deliver results. Execute, deliver results. If what I was doing didn't deliver results, I threw that out and I tried to find something else that was different. So again, going back to the thing, it's not about just being different for the sake of being different. One of the things that is really interesting is, of course, when you talk about doing things the way everybody else does, what immediately comes to my mind is benchmarking. Okay, I know everybody on this call is intimately familiar with best in class, best practices, and benchmarking. Okay, well, if you ever want to go down the journey with me, you need to purge that from your being. Because this isn't a world about copying. It's about creating. And so one of the axioms that I espouse is you want to create, not copy. So you need to figure out a way to get rid of that notion because that's the huge, we talk about things that prevent people from being different. That's one of them because everybody talks about it. Well, what are the best in class companies do? And so you're already being told by your boss, maybe, to go find a best in class company and copy them. And so there's all these barriers. That's just one of them. I mean, the HR recruitment process is another one, but there's just tons of them out there. And to be able to actually push them aside at times requires a Herculean effort. It really does.
Yeah, it does. And it reminds me about you kind of like, it requires a willingness to tolerate discomfort. Because it requires effort to push those things aside, but it can also be uncomfortable. If you've built your career in a certain way by doing what everybody else does, but maybe doing it a little bit better or a little bit faster, and now all of a sudden you're listening to this and you're saying, oh, but I could go in a totally different direction. Again, very results oriented, but taking a different kind of approach. There can be a little bit of discomfort associated with that, which comes back to this idea that pain is a strategic concept. And I want to hear you talk more about that.
Well, there's more than just a little discomfort. I mean, it's agonizing and excruciating pain. Okay, to be told no, to be the only one running out and looking around and there's nobody following you, but there's a whole bunch of people over there, right, with weapons in a metaphorical sense. Okay, ready to shoot you down, and a lot of people who want you to fail. So within that environment, you need to figure out some way of of pushing forward. And for me, I think the secret was that I actually have this stuff running through my veins. It's a part of who I am. And if I didn't have that, then I don't know that I could have sustained, right, the barriers and the roadblocks and the no's, the world, etc. And the other thing I will say to you is I had an amazing support system in my company, amazing, without which and bosses, quite frankly, who tolerated Roy in the crazy things that he did, but they didn't say no. I got more no's from my colleagues, quite frankly, than I did from my bosses. And so that was wonderful for me because it fed me, it gave me hope, and it pushed me. Even though they said to me, "What the hell is that?" And, we had a conversation, and I would be supported to move forward. So the environment makes a big difference, but individually, I mean, it takes its toll. It takes its toll, and you got to be willing to have that happen to you. Otherwise, you won't make any progress. And unfortunately for me, you will conclude that being different isn't a good idea. And that's not right.
Yeah. Well, and that gets back to the pain concept, right? It's, and a willingness to continue to iterate. But I think the other thing you're saying here that's so important is to do what is also consistent with who you are, right? I mean, there's some people who are not wired the way you are, right? They're wired to be a little bit more conventional and follow the path that other people have laid out. And it's going to be challenging for that person to jump to a different way and just to be totally different, and they're different in their approach. But I think what I hear you say is like, stretch yourself a little bit, find the ways that says, how can you be authentic to yourself, goal oriented, but take a different approach, do something that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of like a convention thing here. We all have boundaries that we either impose upon ourselves or other people do. You need to know what they are. You need to own those boundaries and then make the choice as to whether or not you want to break through here, whether it's worth it, or you want to break through there, or whatever. You have to come to grips with this. This is not an academic kind of journey. It isn't. It's an emotional journey. There's no formulas. There's no right and wrong. It's like get the hell out there and try some things. Make mistakes. I mean, I made so many mistakes in my life. I mean, but I don't remember them. What I remember are those absolutely brilliant moments when something actually worked, like hiring for Goosebumps.
Yeah, I was just going to say, give us an example. So maybe it's hiring for Goosebumps.
Well, hiring for Goosebumps was Roy's recruitment process for people that actually loved human beings, because it occurred to me that we had this customer service experience strategy, which is fundamentally dependent on how you recruited people. In other words, you can't teach people to like people. You can teach them how to grin, right? Nice. But you can't teach them to like people. And it occurred to me that one of the values we needed in our organization, particularly on the front line, was the attribute and the innate desire for people to like other people. So the key thing for me came to be, well, how can we figure out, how can we expose that in the way we engage with potential employees? So I came up with, I didn't tag it Goosebumps at the time, but here's how the process went. Oh, by the way, and I participated in panel interviews with people. That was intimidating for two reasons. First of all, the person getting interviewed was intimidated because the president was sitting across the table. Secondly, the person who actually owned the job under question was intimidated because their boss, was sitting there too. And that was done for a very specific reason, to try and kind of imprint what we were doing. So what I would say is to figure out if you loved humans. Rusty, do you love humans? Now, what you're going to say is yes, right? You know it's a loaded question, and probably yes is the right answer. But the next question is, okay, good. I'm glad you do. Could you give me a story? Tell me a story that would show me how much you love people. Now, this is the one that really separated the ones that were basically academically understanding the nature of the question from the ones that understood it and they really got it right. Because you would get stories from the academic kind of response that I felt cold like a fish. Like they were just playing the game with me. But on the other hand, I would get stories from people who were born with this human being lover gene. And they would tell me a story that was so rich with emotion, so deep, so empathetical that my conclusion, and it gave me goosebumps. Okay, the story gave me goosebumps. I hired that person. That's where the genesis of hiring Goosebumps came from. Because you know what? The academics couldn't tell me whether I could discern from person A, whether they had this gene about loving humans. All I could do is give me the standard HR recruitment process, which clearly wasn't working. Okay.
Right.
And so that was the HR people were kind of enthralled by it, but eventually understood that it was my way of extracting human loving DNA from somebody. Did I get it always right? No. Did I get it 80% right? More than that. It's a win.
I want to go back to something you said earlier on in the conversation, which you alluded to, which was the only statement. This has stuck out with me, but it's something that's, because we're talking about being different, and maybe this is an expression of that. So maybe you can explain to us, what is the only statement?
Yeah. So the genesis of the only statement was a recognition of the fact that even though the world is much more competitive and is increasingly more competitive every day, my observation was that businesses and organizations are still mediocre in the way they declare why consumers or customers should buy from them as opposed to anyone else. Okay. Mm-hmm. In other words, I actually contend that undifferentiating is going on in the world right now. Mm-hmm. And how do I know that? Well, if you look at how people express their competitive advantage, they use what I call claptrap words. That would be better, best, market leader, number one. All these meaningless words to describe what they think they are in the market, but it doesn't answer the question: how are you different from your competitor, and how can you leverage that, right, to get people to buy from you? And so, you get claptrapped. We even have people saying, well, my competitive advantage is, I want to save the planet. Really? Okay. That may be an important aspiration for you as an organization, but it sure as hell isn't a declaration of strategic advantage. So anyways, this stuff just was killing me, and it's still killing me. It keeps me up at night, to be honest. So I had to create the only statement. It's mine. Mm-hmm. I created it a long time ago, and it goes like this. We are the only ones who. Okay, not we're better, not we're the best. We are the only ones who do what we do, okay? And regardless of the business you're in, right? The industry you're in, it really doesn't matter. It's binary. It either exists or it doesn't exist. And it can be tracked. It can be proven. It's not this ethereal, helium-filled promise. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're the only ones that do what we do. And so I created this process, and it's a difficult one, and I use it with clients, and I always say to them, look, it's always a draft, right? Yeah. Which blows people away. You mean it's not final? No, wait a minute. We're taught that we need to finalize something so we can move on, Roy. I said, no, you can't finalize something that's a function, all right, of the economy and the competitive environment that is always changing that you're within. So we create this only statement, and we basically use it. I'm searching around here because I have an example. Okay, here's Roy Osing's only statement. Roy Osing is the only author, entrepreneur, and executive leader who delivers practical and proven, audacious, unheard of ways. Nobody else talks about unheard of ways to build high-performing businesses and successful careers. That's mine, but I've also helped other people develop theirs. And the thing is, it's crisp, and it's a draft, and it will be modified as we learn about how effective it is. Now, you have to test it, okay? Is your only statement relevant? In other words, does it address something people care about that we talked about earlier? Mm-hmm. And is it true? Am I actually doing it? Mm-hmm. So you can test it, then you draft it, you start using it as your selling proposition, and you ask your customers for feedback, etc. And it becomes almost like an amoeba and an organic device, right? That grows over time with you through changing markets, through changing economies, etc. It's
great.
One textbook you will find that in, Rusty.
And you answered my question, which I was thinking along the way. Thank
That's
you.
the textbook.
Yes, that is the textbook. Be Different or Be Dead, Roy's book. My question was, can an individual have an only statement? And clearly the answer is yes, because you just shared yours.
Yeah.
Roy, we could go on and on. This is a fantastic conversation, but I want to move us towards wrapping up. Where can they find your book? How can people get in touch with you?
Well, the book's on basically every selling channel there is. I have a website, bedifferentorbedead.com. Come visit me. You can see pages that discuss my books. And I blog every week on my stuff. So there's always different material coming up. And these podcasts, they've been wonderful for me because it just stimulates various dimensions of Be Different or Be Dead. And typically what I'll do is follow up and blog. But I also have an email, roy.osing@gmail.com. And I invite people to connect with me on this stuff. Okay, in terms of what you believe, what you don't believe, what you want explained. I have people now emailing me their draft only statements, Rusty. It's wonderful.
Nice.
And that gives us an opportunity, hopefully, for me to help, which is really want to do. This is all about paying it forward. But more importantly, to build a relationship and hopefully get other people talking to other people about the importance of my work.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, and I will just add, for anyone who's watching on LinkedIn, you've got Roy's contact info right here. So just click and connect. Roy, thank you so much for this. This has been a pleasure. It's been a lot of value that you've shared. So thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. And thanks for having me, Rusty. I've really enjoyed it. It's been fun. You've done it. You did a great job, by the way. Nice.
Thank you. Thank you.